About 20 years into the North American sports car revolution, the muscle car scene hit. Now, it was an important bump in the road because essentially it took everybody's mind off the sports car. Look at this. Great performer, probably the most iconic among all of the muscle cars, the Charger Daytona. Now, this car does brilliantly in a straight line, but I've been heard to say over the last 10 years that the average minivan is going to outbrake this car, and on a rainy day, probably out-accelerate it. So we decided to put that to a test. We came here to Topeka, Kansas, to the home of solo racing at SCCA to test this car against the Honda Odyssey minivan. Now, naturally, we need to keep things fair. This car actually weighs about 400 pounds more than the minivan. Now, for the minivan's part, it's probably the most bland thing you're ever going to see on the road, but it's 40 years of automotive development. This is a beautiful machine. We think it's going to do very, very well on a solo course. Now, to keep things fair weight-wise, we needed to put some weight in here. Now, the family's 2,000 miles away, so last night we had a lovely, savory, yet inexpensive meal at a gentleman's club. And we've got some of the participants there to join us here today. So, gentlemen, put your hands together for Tiffany, Sabrina, Trixie, and Mercedes. Ladies, would you like to take a seat? Oh, I've got a whole lot of $1 bills for you girls.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. Straight out of the box, the horsepower that the Daytona produces is virtually useless. You see, through 14-inch tires, getting that footprint down to the ground becomes very difficult, and then almost immediately you need to start changing direction, which shows off the Daytona's remarkable push. Conversely, if you look at the Honda minivan, it was never meant to be a great straight line machine, so it puts down its power fairly smartly, and the power is usable throughout the rev range. So even with this comely looking extra weight, the car is actually niftier through the corners. Of course, there are parts of the course where the Daytona's power is useful, but you have to wait for the rev range to kind of match up with what you're doing at the time. Now, anti-roll bars and so on obviously have no effect whatsoever on the Daytona, while the ride tuning that Honda's put into this has accounted for the weight, and although there's some body roll, definitely it doesn't affect the driver's ability to control the car until you come to the very limit. And as we suspected, it's the Honda that comes out on top.